Well, welcome everyone to the second session of the Know Your Rights webinar series held by Carers New South Wales in partnership with members of our Carer Rights and Complaints Network, as well as other partners and colleagues in the complaints sector. I'm Sarah Judd-Lamb from Carers New South Wales, the policy and research team here, and my colleague Grace is joining me today to help with administrative tasks. And I'm also pleased to welcome our guest speakers today, Fouad from the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission and Pat Joyce from the Seniors Rights Service. And we have a number of people registered to attend today, a mix of carers and service providers. Today's session is essentially geared towards family and friend carers around the rights that they have and that their loved ones have in accessing aged care services and how to uphold those rights through formal complaints mechanisms. We're also aware, though, that a lot of the people that have registered for today are actually service providers working with carers, and very, very happy for them to participate, ask questions, and to pass that information on to carers. But we'll be trying to present the information in a way that is relevant to and can be easily engaged with by carers, and have plenty of opportunities throughout the presentation for questions. So before we get into the agenda, I also want to recognise that we're meeting on the land of in North Sydney, where I am, the Gorogal people of the Eora Nation, and wherever people are coming from today, whether in the office or at home, I'm sure we're representing a number of different lands, and so of all those lands, we want to pay our respects at Carers New South Wales to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians and the carers in those communities. This session today, as I mentioned before, is part of a series. So the Carer Rights and Complaints Network is a working group established by Carers New South Wales in partnership with the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. And we have been working for a number of years on understanding and communicating the rights that carers have in different service systems. Today's focus is aged care, and we are essentially working to a fact sheet that we've developed on this exact topic. So if there's anything you missed today, or if you want to revise or share the information with somebody else that you think would be interested, this recording will be available, but also there is a fact sheet that covers off the same ground, essentially. And so we're able to have a couple of guests today speak in more detail to some of the topics that are covered in the fact sheet. But all the essential information is in that fact sheet, and we will share that information at the end of this session and send you the link as well once the session is completed. So just one, I guess, disclaimer to flag as well before we get into it. When we're talking about carer rights in this series, we understand that carers are often most concerned with the experiences of the person that they care for with services. So if carers are making complaints or having service issues, a lot of the time that is actually relating to the experience of the family member or friend that they're caring for in relation to services. So in the aged care context, often it's carers looking out for the person that they care for in residential aged care or receiving home care services and speaking up for them if they have a bad experience. But at Carers New South Wales, we're the peak non-government organisation for carers in New South Wales. Our focus is also on carers' own rights and entitlements in service systems and helping carers to understand and stand up for the rights that they have to be treated with respect and to be included in decision making and things like that. So our guest speakers today will be speaking about both older people or consumers and carers, but we recognise that carers might be making kind of complaints in their own right or about the person's experiences that they're caring for. And I know Fouad and Pat will speak to that a little more in their presentations as well. So just looking at our session outline in this slide that we have here, thanks Grace, that you can see we're just introducing the series now. We'll then have the two guest presentations done consecutively. So just short presentations from Fouad and from Pat. And we thought we'd put the questions and discussion together after both presentations so that they cover a bit of different ground. But there will be plenty of time for participants today to ask questions. And we also, in the registration form, you might have seen that we provided the opportunity to ask pre-submitted questions. So we have had a number of pre-submitted questions come through, which we will address. We've just got a couple of other people joining us now, I've just noticed. So hello to our new participants. We're just introducing this session today and the series. So we'll have 2 presentations followed by about a 15-20 minute discussion, depending on how much time and how many questions we have. And we will then wrap up talking about the rest of this webinar series and the fact sheets and where you can find those. And just a note for those joining us currently, we are recording this session, and you should not be present in the recording, but if you want to turn your video off, you're very welcome to do that. I mentioned the webinar series that today's session is part of. That is called the Know Your Rights series, and as you can see on this slide, we are at session 2, and we will be doing monthly sessions middle of the month, Wednesday lunchtime, for most of the rest of the year on the topics that are listed there. So next month will be disability services if people are interested in that, but today we're looking at aged care services in the context of both services delivered in the home and community, and also in residential aged care. So I think the only other thing to cover before we move on to Fouad is questions. So the best way to ask questions live throughout the presentations is to just pop your question in the chat. So we will, when we open the discussion, allow people to take their microphones off mute and ask a question verbally if they would prefer, but as we do have the chat running, and Grace, my colleague, is watching that, if a question arises during a presentation, feel free to throw it in the chat, and then we'll address it in the discussion section later on. And for those of you that have submitted questions, we have those already listed, so we'll address those as well. All right, without much further ado, I will introduce Fouad from the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, who's going to speak to us about investigating complaints about aged care services and the Commission's role. Welcome, Fouad.
Hi, good morning. So yeah, my name's Fouad Aswad. I work with the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. Just briefly, the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission is the body that has the primary responsibility for regulating all aged care government Commonwealth funded services. So from accrediting services to making sure that they're complying with their responsibilities while they operate, and part of the functions of regulation is also receiving and addressing complaints about from residents or from their representatives or from anyone else who about a person receiving care in an aged care service, or whether nursing home or home care service. So I'm the director of the New South Wales ACT complaints area within the Quality and Safety Commission. And I guess we can move to the next slide. So today, really what I want to talk to you, and I'll be brief because I'm more interested in answering questions and listening to you than just talking for too long. But what I'll try to go through quickly is who we are, what we do, how you can make a complaint if you're worried about things happening to your loved one in a nursing home, what we can help you with, and the things that we can't do, obviously, and talk about some resources to assist you. So yeah, so so obviously a very important function that we have at the Commission is receiving complaints and resolving them to get a better outcome for either a resident or a recipient of home care services. So the way we receive complaints is you can call us. There's a number right in front of you. You call that number, and what will happen is you call the number, you press option 1, and a person in my office will speak with you and listen to your story and try and understand the problem that you or your loved one is having with the aged care service provider, and then we'll work with you to put a set of questions to the provider so that we can understand where the problems are. You can also do it via the website, through the website, and you can write a letter to us. The website's right there, and our address is also there on the slide. I can give Sarah some resources, hard copy. I can definitely look to provide hard copies that show you some details about how you can make a complaint. So, yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so how we do it. So when you call us or when you write to us, we will talk to you about what your complaint is about. And then once you tell us that you're happy that we understand what you're complaining about, the first step for us is to go to the provider and ask them to send us a formal response to the problems that you're experiencing. We will then look at the response that they've given us. We will also ask them for supporting evidence and records about the care that your loved one's receiving or yourself. And then we will talk to you about the response and understand from you what in that response may be accurate according to your understanding and where there are potential problems, and then we will help you to come to an outcome with the provider. If it turns out that the complaint that you've given us is complicated and needs a lot more involvement from on our part, we will move from what we call early resolution, which is trying to fix the problem quickly, to a more involved investigation process where we will then do detailed work to understand the nature of the problem and possible solutions. So next slide, please. So when we what we do to make sure that we understand the problem that you're coming to us with, we can do a lot of things. Well, obviously the most important thing is we will talk to you and make sure that we understand what you're telling us. We will definitely talk to the resident. So you're complaining about the care that your loved one is receiving. If your loved one is able to talk to us and to give us their view about what's going on, we must talk to them as well. We can go on site to the service and do a site visit to observe and to collect environmental evidence, to look at what's going on at the service. We can get clinical documents from the service about the care that your loved one's receiving and what is recorded, and we can analyze that documentation to understand whether there are problems or things that need to be addressed. We can interview staff. We will obviously talk to staff at the service and to management staff as well, and we can review policies and procedures to determine whether the care that your loved one's receiving is in accordance with the policies and procedures that the service has in place. Okay, so next slide. This is a bit about what we do when you give us information about yourself and your loved one. So obviously in talking to us about a complaint, you're going to tell us some personal information about yourself, about the resident or the care recipient, your loved one, and we are going to now have to deal with this information. So the way we deal with it, the way we store it on our system, the way we use it, these things are governed by privacy laws. So we're not allowed to use your information except for the purpose of dealing with your complaint and fixing the complaint. We must store it securely, and we have systems to do that. And when you give us information, one thing that we will do is send you a notice of collection to explain to you how we deal with your information and how we store it and use it. Next, please. Yeah, so obviously we receive a lot of complaints from carers, from residents, and from other parties. They could be visitors or potentially staff members at the services, many sources. And we receive complaints about many types of issues. So you can imagine things like how medication is being given to your loved one, the personal care and the oral hygiene that they're receiving, We get complaints about staff and staffing ratios and numbers and whether there's adequate staffing. We get complaints about falls prevention, about dementia care, behavior management. We get complaints about wound care, pressure area care, pressure injury prevention, um, complaints about deteriorating condition and whether treatment um, was brought in, like whether the service organized for the person to be treated in a timely manner, and nutrition, food, hydration, continence management, assistance to go to the toilet, things of this nature. So a lot of issues we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we are quite um, like experienced in dealing with all these types of issues, and we deal with them in different ways. And obviously there are different ways that we can help you get the outcome that you're looking to get for your loved one, whether it be by finding where the problems are and working with the particular service to ask them to do things to rectify problems. We can organize for you to meet with the representatives from the provider where they can talk you through what the problem areas that we were able to find and how they will work with you to provide better care in the future. And we facilitate these types of meetings, so we'll be there and you'll be sitting with the provider and we'll be helping you to have the discussion with the provider. Other issues that we deal with in home care, for example, include things like fees and charges, consultation and communication with the resident. Are you being consulted about the care that you want to receive? Are they taking into account your views as a resident or as a representative in terms of what care should be provided? Consistency of services not being delivered in a consistent way, and financial statements, carers not being able to read or understand what is written in the financial statement. In terms of consistency of service, it's around things like my services are being missed, carers are not turning up every time, or they keep changing the service without giving me any notice, or they come at the unscheduled, things like that. So a whole heap of issues that we deal with. So next slide, please. Nothing about you without the slide. If you can see the slides in front of you, this is a very important principle that informs our work. It is a requirement for us and we must do this thing. What it means is when I receive a complaint about a particular person or the care that a particular person is receiving, I am obliged to inform them that we have received this and to tell them what the complaint about them is about and seek their views into this. So this is something that we're required to do. There is very little discretion around it, and unless there is a compelling reason for us not to contact the person receiving care, we will always do that. Some of the compelling reasons could be potentially that the person has advanced cognitive impairment or dementia and are unable to provide us any input. Then that would be a compelling reason. Otherwise, we will strive to communicate with the person receiving care. And so you understand we are a very care recipient and complainant friendly service. So we will call you by telephone. If you're not able to, we will come out and visit you and meet with you face to face so that we can provide you an opportunity to tell us your story. We will go to the nursing home and meet with your loved one to talk to them if we have to. We will come with an interpreter so that we can help you or we can allow you the opportunity to speak in the language that you are most comfortable with. So these are some of the things that we want to do to make sure that your feedback we are taking it into account and making sure that we get it in the best possible way. Okay, next slide. Look, I think I'll stop here for now. I think I've gone over time a bit, but happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Fouad. And it's really great to be able to put a face, I think, to the Commission and hear more about what the Commission's able to do for carers that report an issue with an aged care service. I know sometimes these big agencies can be a bit faceless and challenging to navigate. So hopefully carers and service providers today have seen that it can be accessible and that there's lots of things the Commission can do to help, and that they're really keen to try and help resolve some of these issues. More information about the Commission's role in relation to other agencies and in relation to carers' experiences is included in the fact sheet that corresponds with today's session. So in case you haven't seen that, I've just put the link to that in the chat box for this session today, and both the link to the Commission's information, the phone number, and also where they fit and in which kinds of situations you would access the Commission is all mentioned in there in that fact sheet. And while I mentioned the chat box, as Fouad said, we will address questions a little bit later. So if you have questions for Fouad, please feel free to put them in the chat box anytime, and then we'll come back to them after Pat's presentation in the discussion session. So in terms of introducing Pat, if we can go to that next slide, Grace, I guess before I introduce Pat, I guess something to note about the fact sheets that we've been talking about is that, you know, we understand working in policy that these systems are really complicated, and, you know, some carers feel confident to navigate that if they've got some background in the sector, but for other people it's just completely overwhelming. And so our main goal in this whole Know Your Rights project, the webinars and the fact sheets, is to try and simplify that information as much as possible for carers. And you can simplify information, but when a system is complex and when there's lots of different pathways, it still can be complicated no matter how much you try and simplify how it's presented. So one thing that's really fantastic in the aged care context is that there is an organisation that can work with individuals, so work with older people and their carers to find the right approach and pathways when there's a problem, and also to be alongside and support them in that process. That doesn't exist in all sectors, so it's really great that we can introduce Pat from Seniors Rights Service to talk a little bit about how especially carers that are just not sure where to go can get that assistance and not have to worry too much about working out the details. So thanks for joining us, Pat, and yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thanks Sarah, and thanks everyone. So I at the moment manage a team of 14 aged care advocates scattered right across the state. So at the moment we've got plenty of people who've got special funding for this COVID period with extra calls. So we've got lots of people to be available to take your calls and any questions at all. So thanks. Next slide and the next one, thanks. So it's all about knowing your rights. So if you know aged care rights and the standards of care and the rights and responsibilities, you may be able to speak up for yourself. But what we find is older people especially don't want to rock the boat. They don't want their family or friends to speak up on their behalf. So the first thing is to get clear about the rights, what an advocate can do, and we're especially aged care advocacy. We're not general advocates. So this is our field. We can help people who are considering aged care services, wanting to know more about it, you know, changing from home care to residential care, respite, and even afterwards when they leave, if there are issues afterwards. So we can talk to anyone really, whereas the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission need the older person's permission, and we'll speak to their representative. You can call us. We'll talk to some staff members and we'll give them some direction. We can talk to carers and other family members or friends. Last week we got so many calls from who were just dear friends of people in aged care, and they had concerns as well. So we can give all those people information. So before you even get to complaints, we talk about information, and that's freely available in all sorts of areas. No one's an expert. It's a very complex system, aged care and aged care services in Australia. So we also have social workers on our team, so a bit of social support. and grief counselling, all that, family issues, which are part of looking after an older person receiving care, but it's sometimes not the provider's responsibility, but it's happening. The person comes as a whole person with their family and some complex issues as well as health issues. So social support can help with that. We do a lot of education. I was at a carers group yesterday, and we can share some of the information we have and some tips for them to look after themselves and get clear about how to ask for more information and how to give feedback. Now, that's the first step with complaints. Give feedback and know that that will help the person that you care for. Also, it might help the provider to get clear about their communication. Maybe their style isn't very productive, or maybe they need to sit down and really work on the relationship with you and the older person so you can get better results and outcome. We're also a community legal centre. Thanks. Next slide. So I must say that what I'm talking about today, I'm not a solicitor and we're not giving any legal information, although we do talk about the Aged Care Act and New South Wales laws as well. So if you have a legal question, you may contact our solicitor. Thank you. So the goals of this discussion is to find out what an independent advocate can do, what we can't do, who we advocate for, how to raise concerns, and then making a complaint. I think the next slide, thank you. So our role is to give information to the public and the recipients of aged care, home support, potential consumers who are looking into aged care and their carers. Also, we talk about the rights of older people in aged care, and it's specifically the aged care recipients' rights and responsibilities. But as you will learn more from these talks and webinars, that Carers New South Wales will talk about the rights of carers, the Carers Charter of New South Wales only, not other states. So from our point of view, it's mostly the rights of the older people, and we've got to make sure that they're in the centre of every conversation. Hopefully if we meet, they'll be in the room with the family as we discuss any issues, so they feel involved and we can empower them by giving them the information to be able to speak up and be part of the solution as well. They definitely need to be involved. And the carers have a right to information. You've heard about the Carers Charter, so you have a right to be treated with respect and to be heard, to have open communication with the management, people who are helping manage the care. You have a right to attend care planning meetings and give feedback and history, especially people who have cognitive decline and dementia. You need to be aware of the triggers and what sort of calming strategies you have, and also where to get information. The carers group yesterday, a lot of them hadn't heard of it. There's a 24-hour dementia helpline. So if we can give little tips like that, twice the last 2 days I've mentioned community visitor scheme to the carers group and a provider who said, oh yes, I hadn't thought of them. So we can be helping people from all aspects of the care, with the older person in the middle, trying to make things better for them. Thank you. Next slide. So the Charter of Aged Care Rights starts with, the language is different in the last 2 years. It says, I have a right to respect, dignity, to choose and make choices, to be treated as an individual, and also to take risks. So we often have that conversation with the older person, the carers, and family members, as well as care providers, about what risk is. And there's also a lot of information on the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission website about the risk as well, and who to talk to when there's an incident. You can't be having the whole family involved after something happens, but you can inform everyone before someone enters aged care or when they're there about rights. You have a contact person who gets contacted if someone has a fall in an aged care home or something happens to their condition, they need someone to respond. So whereas we can talk to the whole family. In home care situations, over the last few years, especially with the new standards and the new Charter of Rights, you can say that, yes, this whole family cares for this older person at home. You have to have a meeting and 8 family members will turn up, maybe with an interpreter, because that's how they provide care for this older person. Next slide, thanks guys. So the rights talk about safe and high quality care and services. So anyone can make a complaint if it's not listened to. If your concerns are raised and you've tried to resolve the issue and you can't, then we can help you make a formal complaint either in writing to the care provider, and usually we get an instant response. Care providers are there, they've got all the information as well, they've got all the guidelines, and we can work with them to address issues early so they don't go to the aged care quality and safety. They're resolved at the same time and raised early and resolved early. So dignity, respect, information about rights, care and services, options. Sometimes it's someone asked yesterday, can we get someone who speaks mum's language to come into the home and speak to her? So questions like that, there are ways around, there's options for every scenario you could possibly think of, and between us all we can work something out. And the older person's independence is vital. Next slide, thanks. So with those rights do come responsibilities. They're not included on the current charter. It's just a charter of rights, but the responsibilities are included in a little booklet available from the department. It talks about respect and consideration of others. So that's whether it's the resident or the home care recipient, or the visitors, or myself, or carers. So anyone who's representing the consumer must respect the staff and other people in the facility or the service, and be mindful of the resident's behaviour, or the home care recipient or the carer, and everyone needs to have respect. And your rights as a consumer don't compete with other people. So sometimes people ring and say, well, my dad, he's more important than the other resident who shares his room. But we have to say, well, actually both residents have equal rights, and sometimes that's hard to negotiate, especially with privacy and not talking about the other person's diagnosis or treatment or behaviours. So we can help just navigate that a little bit as well. Next slide, thanks guys. So we talk about making improvements instead of raising complaints. So there is an internal complaint system. The first thing is, in any dispute, have a chat with someone in charge, the RN in an aged care home, someone senior, care manager, manager of the facility. In the home care situation, there'll be a case manager, there'll be someone in charge you can go to and report anything at all, including issues about staff behavioural lack in their training or something they might need reminding of. And then if nothing's resolved, we can escalate to the external complaints. And we can help write a letter. We can help you. Anyone can make an anonymous complaint by the website or letter. And we've even made anonymous complaints on behalf of residents. A couple of years ago, with 10 residents had a complaint about food. And they brought the issue up of their meals and choices, and several residents meeting and weren't getting anywhere. So I helped them write a letter, anonymous letter, just saying this is happening in this facility, and 10 residents are raising this. So we can do that for you. A carer asked me yesterday, well, if I make an anonymous complaint, I probably won't hear back what the outcome is. And that's true. So if you have the older person's permission, or you're the guardian, you can make a complaint and then get a written response from the complaints people, and then you have it in writing. And of course, systemic issues, that's one thing we don't deal with, but we can raise those to our national organisation, the Older Persons Advocacy Network. You might have been on their website or ours and seen the links to many webinars that they've had as well. Yesterday there was one on the Royal Commission, and there's many titles to choose from. So we can raise issues to them. We can raise issues with the Department of Health, Commonwealth. We are soon hopefully resuming our regular meetings with the aged care quality and safety and all aspects of care and services for older people. And there are other places we can go to, systemic issues, local members. Say there's a shortage of home care places or residential care places or respite in your area. You can talk to the local member. You can raise concerns anywhere that you can, anyone you think of, any contacts, and they in turn will refer you back to us for advocacy support or straight to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. So you can start your complaint anywhere at all. Many years ago, I remember received a complaint directed to us from the Prime Minister of Australia. So if that's where the referral comes, we're very happy to help you start from there, talk about communication, food issues, or even something more serious, so we can get the facts. And also the other side of the situation. We had a call the other day from a friend, visited her mate in an aged care home. He said, look, I go to bed hungry every night. So that's obviously a concern, and there may be a reason why. Maybe he has had a full meal and supper, and maybe he's forgotten that he's had something to eat, or his dentures could be ill-fitting. There could be many reasons why. So as soon as someone speaks up, we can help get to the bottom of that concern and see some outcomes. Thanks. Next slide. So yes, we're totally independent, and we receive funding from all these great services to do this work. So call us. The information's also on the information sheet that Sarah spoke of, and we will talk to anyone, and we can happily refer you on if it's a wrong department. We can give you some tips. So thanks we look forward to questions now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Pat. And once again, Seniors' Rights Service is just such a great resource that it doesn't really exist necessarily in other sectors, and it just is really a one-stop shop for any carer or older person that wants to raise an issue about an aged care service and doesn't know where to start. So as we mentioned in our fact sheet, that's still linked there in the chat. If you are looking at that and you're just thinking that the other formal pathways just look too complicated or overwhelming, if you're going to go to one place, go to the Seniors' Rights Service, and they'll point you in the right direction and provide you with sort of more hands-on support if that's needed. So we've had some great presentations. I'm sure we've got some questions. We've had one so far live question in the chat, which we've logged there, and we'll start with that. But if anyone has any other questions based on Pat's presentation just now or for Fouad, feel free to add them now. And what we thought we would do is just work our way through the questions, starting with the live ones and then going on to the ones that were submitted in the registration form process. If any others come up, you can put them in the chat. When there's an opportunity, if you want to speak up, you can do that as well. And because, you know, Fouad might have some information in response to one question, Pat might have some additional information to add, I might have some information to add. We'll just have a bit of a panel discussion in response to those questions, and people can comment and ask supplementary questions if they would like. So we've got a great question there in the chat to start us off, and maybe I'll put this out to Fouad and Pat for you to answer first. So if there is a home care package issue, who should the carer contact, Fair Trading or the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission?
I would say call an advocate first, and we might give you some background information, and then it might even help if it goes to a complaint. They'll have more background to provide for investigation.
Pat is correct. If I can tell you, call us, but then if you do, we will work out with you whether it's in scope for us or out of scope. I mean, one of the things that I said I would talk about earlier and I didn't is what we cannot do. Now, some of the things that we cannot do in relation to home care services is, for example, to look at problems that a person has had when equipment that has been purchased through the package is faulty. That's an example of an issue that goes to fair trading, because the problem is in the equipment that was bought from a third party through the package. So the provider is only marginally responsible for something like that, and the responsibility lies with the supplier. So if you went to Pat with a question like that, Pat's team can talk you through what comes to us and what is out of scope for us.
Thanks both, great answers. And the other thing I was just going to add was in the fact sheet associated with this session, was recognising that a question like home care, that it depends on what about home care as to where the complaint goes. And I think so in the fact sheet we've tried to sort of structure that and spell that out as much as possible in terms of so just bringing up to look at it myself, that's the one that's linked here. So we've sort of separated it into complaints about assessment related issues and outcomes, complaints about the quality of services, quality and safety of services, and then complaints about paying for purchasing private services or equipment, and then concerns about abuse. So it doesn't perfectly solve the issue, but one of the things we identified in putting these fact sheets and these webinars together was the way that the complaint system is organised is not always logical from the perspective of the person that's making the complaint, and that it's really down to what kinds of issues and who you can approach about those kinds of issues. So we've tried to spell that out, but again, if in doubt, contact the Seniors' Rights Service. They'll point you in the right direction, because it does get complicated, and not just in the aged care setting, but in all the other service sectors as well. Different agencies have different responsibilities, and some are better than others at kind of helping you get in the right direction. Definitely the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission is one of those that's obviously committed to helping you find the right place, but getting some advocate support is also a very helpful thing, and potentially less time consuming and less stressful for everybody involved. Pre-submitted questions that we had, which we've sent to our guest speakers as well today. I'll just work through those in order. And again, if anything comes up from people that are participating today, feel free to ask it. We had one question, Fouad and Pat, from someone whose mother recently passed away while in care, and they had difficulty managing the palliative process because of information about treatment not being conveyed by the GP. They tried to follow up with the care facility, but they weren't really happy with how the complaint was handled. And so in talking to the GP after the mother had passed away, and to the nursing staff, they had some questions around the correct procedure. So their question was around whether that issue could be escalated further, given that the care facility had not really responded beyond the original phone call. So did either of you want to start by addressing that?
I'll dive in first, if you like, Fouad. So I'm sorry if that person's listening today, that was your experience. So very sorry. I would explore if the palliative care team was involved, and they're the ones you ring 24 hours a day to come and help contact the GPs for advice and anything clinical to help that person in their care. The GPs and staff need to be careful of their language and how they, again, communication is very important at this delicate time of life and someone's passing. So it doesn't look like it was handled very well. So I'm sorry that we couldn't have helped at the time, and it's hard to give advice afterwards. But they can definitely write a letter and say, this is my experience of my loved one's passing in care. And I just want to let you know, so maybe in the future you can look at your response and how you handled it, and hopefully you'll get a response from that.
Anything to add, Fouad?
Yes, look, I'm so sorry about your experience, and yeah, like it is a pretty distressing type of experience. We do deal with many complaints that are along similar lines, and if I'm to go into any additional specifics than what Pat has already said, I would say that to be able to, there is certainly something for complaints in the Quality Safety Commission to look at here, because the aspect that we would get involved in revolves around because the service has a responsibility and staff have a responsibility to monitor any resident and to assess how the care that is being provided is being effective. In this particular instance, the question talks about pain. and the management of pain. Now, and obviously there is interface because there's a palliative care team, there's a doctor who needs to prescribe the medication, but there is also the service who has the responsibility to administer the medication and then to monitor the effectiveness of the medication, and then on the basis of what they're seeing in terms of the effect of the medication, escalate any escalate to the doctor for any further reviews and additional pain relieving measures. Now, this is what we would look at if we were to receive a complaint of this nature, or even this particular complaint. We would test whether the service, when the doctor said what they said, whether the service did what they needed to do in providing information about the level of pain, and also potentially seeking alternative medical review to make sure that pain is under control. So I think this one would certainly be within scope, and we would look at it, and the outcome that we would be looking to achieve in this instance. Unfortunately, there are no outcomes for the particular resident who has now passed, but the outcome would be to make sure that the provider, where there may have been failures to comply with responsibilities, that these are addressed so that future residents do not have to experience similar circumstances.
Thanks both, great answers, and thank you for the question. And yeah, I think it also reflects, we all are aware that there's a lot of scrutiny at the moment in terms of quality of aged care services, with the Royal Commission final report being handed down recently. And obviously during COVID, there's been additional challenges around service quality, and there's a lot of opportunities to provide that feedback to individual services and also to the aged care sector, and to get things improved. And I guess that's where our role, as well as Carers New South Wales, comes in. While we can't provide individual support with complaints and with advocacy, we are very, very interested in following up on system issues that are identified, to make sure that if there's system problems that need to be addressed, that they get addressed. So, also you're welcome to discuss those kinds of matters with us. But if it's about getting a specific situation resolved and getting a provider notified about a problem, as Pat and Fouad have said, it's very worthwhile pursuing those avenues. In mentioning COVID and the impacts of that potentially on service quality and complaints, the next question that we had that was pre-submitted is around the visitor restrictions, which we haven't touched on in the fact sheet, because the fact sheet was mainly written prior to COVID, but also because things were moving so fast last year around visitor changes and restrictions, that it's just something that, it's hard to put in writing in something that might be printed. So Carers New South Wales has been very interested and involved in providing information and in advocating about the challenges that many relatives have had and friends have had in visiting people in aged care facilities where there's been COVID outbreaks and restrictions. So this question it relates to that. And the question was, can you please outline carers' rights to advocate for receiving or essential care visits to visit a residential aged care facility when visitor restrictions are in place, and whether there's opportunities to appeal or support that's available.
Okay, well, I'm happy to dive in first and let Fouad finish off again if you like. So during COVID, especially after things had settled somewhat, some aged care facilities had total lockdowns for up to 5 months, which goes against people's human rights. So Older Persons Advocacy Network and a few other key organisations and peak bodies, even aged care providers, peak bodies, got together and wrote a visitation code to make sure that things are set out in a fair way. And as advocates, we took many hundreds of calls about this, and even over Christmas, we were on the call for the whole nation, and the outbreak in different states as well. So there are exemptions, and what we can do as advocates is just give information about each state. Like New South Wales Health has guidelines about visitation, who can access, and those exemptions. And it's got to be a care and support visit. So we could help get people to explore that. Also look at the Commonwealth guidelines and hotspots and things like that. So look at both of those bits of information from the experts, health experts, and they are the authorities for COVID. And if people aren't happy with that, or they think they are, they've gone to their local member or the health minister and they have a letter saying they're exempt, and the aged care home still doesn't let them enter, that's when or even before, we'll let them go onto the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission and see if they can get support, because, you know, they've obviously got support to enter as an exempt person. And the same as wearing masks. You know, there's a pharma and flu shot. So it's very complex during COVID, and what we do is take case by case and try and support the person's situation, give them facts, and refer them on whoever can give them a final answer. Thanks.
Okay, so look, thank you, Pat. Again, spot on. But look, I'm going to talk about the current situation, because if I'm going to go through what happened during COVID, we'll be here for the whole afternoon. So I think the most important thing for individuals now is to understand what is the current situation with respect to the rights of a person entering or visiting a nursing home or a loved one in an aged care service. And I guess that is all informed by the government's three-tiered approach in terms of responding to COVID and the risk of infection. There's a three-tiered approach, and that is determined by the government at any given time based on the rates of infection in the community and the risk that they're detecting. These tiers are 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the highest tier, where you might find there will be heavy restrictions on people entering nursing homes. Tier 2 is somewhere in the middle. And tier 1 is the tier where the expectation is that access to loved ones in services is along the lines of what it was pre-COVID. Now, we are currently in tier 1, right? So currently the government has set the response, the response at tier 1. That means a person or someone wanting to visit a resident in a nursing home should be able to visit that person in the same way that they were visiting the person pre-COVID, with some important differences that are sort of aimed at minimizing, the risk of infection or bringing an infection into the nursing home and things like that. These measures are the screening that is required to happen. So at the moment, the only way a nursing home can tell you you're not allowed to enter is if you refuse to have your temperature taken, if you refuse to sign in as per the requirements under tier 1. So provided that you're willing to comply with the tier 1 requirements in terms of screening and monitoring, you should be able to arrange for a visit to your loved one. Now, where a provider is telling you there are specific reasons that you can't, or we need to be more restrictive, we take a very strong line. The Commission takes a very strong line on these types of situations. The onus is on a provider to explain what justifies restrictions that are above and beyond what tier 1 requires them to do. So there is a big onus on providers to explain restrictions that are beyond what can be expected, and we will get involved in those if we receive complaints, and we will definitely do some work to address this and assist you in visiting your loved ones.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, both of you, and especially Fouad, for such a clear outline of where the status quo is, clearest that I've heard so far. And it's definitely been a very complex area and challenging. And it's a really great issue to highlight how the older person's human rights in being able to have the social support and the practical support that is associated with having family and friends visit is also related to the family member and friends right to have that connection and be able to access the person. And so it's just been really great, I think, over the past 12 months to see how the Commission and Seniors Rights Service and others have really taken those challenges seriously to make sure that, you know, where possible, infection control is being balanced with the importance of maintaining those community connections as much as possible in residential aged care. So yeah, once again, the message, I guess, remains: if you're having trouble accessing residential aged care to visit people, there should be things you can do, and you can find out why. And you know, if there's problems, they can be explored. But it's good that there's a lot more freedom of movement at the moment. Noticing that we're close to finishing time, which is, things have flown by today. The last question that we had kind of was twofold. And so I think I'll briefly put the first part of that out to you both. And then I might wrap up with the second part of it that's around the Carer Gateway in closing off the session. Someone has asked about avenues if they are unhappy with the level of support from the Commonwealth Home Support Program.
I can make a comment there. So Commonwealth Home Support is just very basic care and services. And a lot of people who have been assessed for home care packages, 1, 2, 3 and 4, have been allocated some care and services to help them manage at home. A bit of respite and personal care, shopping, things like that. So they are very basic care and services. And again, it'll be case by case person. But remember, there is quite a large waiting list for some of those high level care. So it'll have to be case by case if anyone contacts us about that, what you've agreed to and what the person's assessed. And the second part is anyone can make a complaint. We've spoken today about rights, and everyone has rights to speak up if something's not right, quite okay. And we always say My Aged Care or Carers Gateway, there's someone who answers the phone and they will have a supervisor. We all have someone, you know, to go higher than we are, and if you're not happy with the person you spoke to, they will have a complaint system, and you have a right to ask, look, I'm not happy with this, who can I speak with, please? You can either do that on the website or in person, and definitely give us a call, we'll help you with that.
Thanks, Pat. Did you want to add anything, Fouad?
Sorry, yes, sorry, yeah, if just very briefly, what Pat said is correct. They are basic services, they are within scope for us, so wise to understand, or it would be wise to contact Pat's team, because they can kind of guide you in the right direction. We certainly can take complaints about Commonwealth support program. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great, thanks both. So just in wrapping up, I guess the second part of that question, pre-submitted question, was around how to make complaints and to escalate complaints around Carer Gateway, which, because it's not aged care services specific, we won't focus on too much. But I guess just to reiterate Pat's point just earlier, these webinars, these fact sheets are really intended to encourage carers that if there's an issue, they can and should raise it, that there are systems and processes in place to help them do that. And that you can't guarantee that they'll get the outcome that you want, but there's always a level above to escalate. And so it's really worth trying if there's something that's concerning you. And so with the Carer Gateway, that applies as well. It's a newish service, so it is less clear. And we actually have a draft fact sheet at the moment to add to this series on Carer Gateway, which is not available yet, but there is information on the Carer Gateway website about their pathway, and the same principles apply there as with any other government funded program. First, address the issue with the people that you're receiving the services from directly. If you want to make a formal complaint, every non-government organisation and every government agency has to have a formal complaints pathway, and if you ask staff about it, they have to provide you that information. So you can make a formal complaint through the service provider, and then if you're not happy with that, there are external opportunities to complain. And so what we might do is include the link for that information on the Care Gateway website in the follow-up email that we send around. I'll ask Grace to do that. But there will be a fact sheet on that in future. And I'm happy to speak to whoever asked that question after the session if you'd like some more clarity. But we will wrap up because we're over time. So I just wanted to say a great thank you again to Pat and Fouad for joining us today. They've provided really, really great information. Please do look at that fact sheet. If Grace could just switch the slide to the link there. The series of fact sheets, including this one, are available on our website. And we have the next webinar coming up on the disability sector next month. And we will send an email this afternoon with some follow-up links and also a brief evaluation survey that we'd just love to hear your feedback on the session. We'll also be sending around the link to the recording of this session when it's available, and that will be available to share. So thank you once again for your time today.
Can I say last words?
Yes. What's
last
your last word?
Okay. If you have a problem or something's going wrong for your loved one, you should call and either call Pat or call our team and make a complaint. You can make an anonymous complaint, you can make a confidential complaint, you can make an open complaint, and we can explain to you what these means. We cannot get you compensation, we cannot punish specific staff, we cannot take a provider to court, but we can improve the care that your loved one's receiving. We can help you restore a working relationship with the service provider that you have to work with, and we can certainly help keep your loved one safe. So make sure that if there is something wrong, complaints area is here to assist. Thank you.
Definitely. Last word, Pat?
Yes, thank you. So things may come up, things may come up in your caring role over the years. So just if you see something that's not right, speak up to any one of us at all. We can help start the ball rolling, and then you can improve it for your loved one. Plus everyone else, we'll all learn from what you teach us. And it's about the older person, and they're in the centre of all of this, what they need and what they want. So speak up early. Early the better. Don't wait for it to be too late.
Definitely. All right, thanks everyone, and we hope to see you next time.